on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, and Caesar. Give to Caesar what's due. And that's around the conversation that we'll be having this morning. But before we, and we're going to welcome our guests, just to remind you that we're having, these conversations that matter from day to day. And we get into that conversation this morning with Rispa Simiu, who is a commissioner for large and medium taxpayers. There are large and medium taxpayers.
Yes, there are.
There are.
Yes.
And she'll tell us who those are, and we'll tell us if they're the small ones as well.
We might actually be surprised to find that Standard fits somewhere around there.
Around there.
Yes.
All right. We shall see. Rispa, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Every time we hear Kenya Revenue, we want to hide under the table.
Nah, she's not telling you the truth. That's what we used to do. But over time, Kenya Revenue Authority has made a sterling effort to demystify what it is that people fear about them. Yeah. And they've come out. Let me talk about this show. The number of times they've come here and been represented well to talk about what they do, how they're doing it, new products, how it is they're going to take more of our money. All these things that they have done, they've come out and said it.
Yes. See? So now
how?
Yes. No, they have. And
fantastic.
Even when there are queries, they have come and they have explained. Good. So KRA are a much easier unit to consume.
Good.
Than before, when in my time they were called income tax. Now that one, you have no idea how fearful they were.
That's refreshing.
Yes.
Indeed. So that was actually where I was segueing to, but it's great that City did that. And so we're having this conversation really and getting to a time where, KRA is now supporting folks to do essentially what the law requires. But before we get into that conversation, let's welcome you properly into the Situation Room. CT goes to a different African country every week. I'm sure you must have heard. He comes back with he said oops.
Yes. I was dreading this.
Oh wow. So he comes back every week from a different country with a basket full of proverbs. You have the unique opportunity this morning of interpreting the proverb that he will give us, and he'll tell us which country it's from, and then you can tell us what you think about it and how you would interpret it. You'll be fine, trust me.
Is it a tax proverb?
No. It's a horticultural problem.
Let me tell you, there's a world outside KRA.
We are in the Republic of Zimbabwe, a beautiful country. And yet, tragically, it is like a summary of the tragedy of the continent. A very rich country, rich in minerals, rich in natural resources, but yet the citizenry do not benefit from all this. They do not really. The proverb: we thank the flowers once we have eaten the fruit.
We thank the flowers once we've eaten the fruit.
Yes.
Could that be honey from bees?
Go on. Your interpretation will be accepted.
My interpretation, so there's no right or wrong answer.
No.
We thank the flowers once we've eaten the
fruit. Yes.
Okay, I would imagine it from two ways. One, because of the pollination and the insects as they help with the pollination process and the trees bear fruit.
Yes.
Or we thank the flowers once we've eaten. We thank the bees after they have produced the honey for our consumption. Okay.
Yes.
And when the teacher did this, it meant you're far from the answer.
No. This particular teacher is doing this because the teacher likes it. Because essentially, we are saying that we will thank KRA once they've taken our money.
Oh, really?
See?
Okay.
Because without KRA taking our money, then we have no money to do the things we need to do.
Yes.
It's so complicated.
There you go.
Yes.
True that. True that.
Good to hear. So, as we look at a number of these issues, when we hear things like tax compliance, we hear things like tax obligations, we hear things like responsibility in terms of what you do. Our focus this morning is on large and medium taxpayers, their responsibilities, and then being able to meet their obligations. And so where there is support, that means that at some point there was an issue or how to actually get it done. So getting to the point where the authority then had to offer support, what are some of the issues that you saw that it was clear that, okay, maybe some of these folks need some help in order for us to operate? What were the issues? What were the before now as we get into this?
All right. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having me once again. So maybe let me start by going back to a sentence that you've just made, that offering support means there was an issue. The issue might be positive or negative, so I want to paint it in a positive picture. Is that an issue does not necessarily mean a problem. It just means that you have the potential of doing much more for your clientele. And as you grow, you realize perhaps there are some specific ways of handling a particular lot of people. So let me just paint the picture a bit. Now, as KRA, we largely have, of the 100% revenue that we collect, just about 35% is customs. So that's under the Customs and Border Control. Prior to 1st of March 2025, we had the Domestic Taxes Department. Now, anything else that is within our boundaries then is domestic tax. So customs was responsible for 35%, and domestic taxes was responsible for 65%. Now, in this lot of 65%, as I said, it is everything domestic, everything within our boundaries. And from here, you have that person earning from as little as 100,000, 10,000, whatever amount, 1 shilling, all the way to billions of shillings. As long as it's under domestic taxes, then it falls under this lot of domestic taxes that collect 65%. So what did we do effective 1st of March 2025? There was that realization, and it has been there for some time, that perhaps sometimes there is either focus on the larger team, and we call that large taxpayers, and less focus probably on the smaller taxpayer. Yeah, and all this was under one commission, and that was me. So what we did as an organization is say, can we then have a split such that then we have two teams of that 65%? So taking this 65% to be 100% of domestic taxes, you say large taxpayers, and these ones are those ones who have a turnover of 1.3 billion shillings and above
in a year.
Then you have the medium taxpayers who have between 200 million shillings and 1.3, and then you have the public sector, so all public sector entities. So these three were batched together, and these three then carry 85% of their 100%. Remember I said when you look at the 65, taking that to be 100, these three cover 85%. And then we have the rest of our clientele who now carry 15% of the domestic tax revenue. So that just paints the picture. So then these two now be out of one department, now we have two. The one that deals with LMT, large and medium taxpayers, that's myself, and another one that deals with micro and small taxpayers. So when talking about focus, it's more having like a more focused approach, targeted approach to these lots of taxpayers. The MST, micro, being of course the majority, because you'll find that the LMT are just about 10,000. But of this pot, we have about 20 million taxpayers. Some are not active, but also MST, we have just about probably 9-10 million. So they are the most, but then that was the need to have a focus on that lot and also on this lot separately. So that's really what was the driving factor.
So when we talk about matters to do with tax, pretty much, there is always the aspect of compliance, and one would therefore get to ask, in terms of your department just making sure that everybody who's supposed to remit taxes knows their role responsibility, and that they also just play their role in making sure that they are compliant. So what are you doing to ensure that that happens?
So looking at my space specifically, when you're talking, they'll allow me to call it LMT, large and medium taxpayers, LMT. We have a framework we call basically the relationship management or account management framework. So in this instance now, you have someone, when you talk about an account manager, that is a person who looks, for example, if you're talking about standard, you have that person who looks at your day-to-day account, at your account on a day-to-day basis, guiding you, addressing your questions, or I have a system problem here, or I'm unable to file, or reminding you have not paid this, you're supposed to pay. That's the account manager. Then you have the relationship manager. Sometimes it could be one person double hatting. But then you have the relationship manager. And the relationship manager is that person who, for lack of better words, maintains a relationship with Standard Chartered. Going back to the
Standard Group.
Standard Group, sorry.
Chartered, those are the guys who have a lot of money. Yes.
Standard Group, I'm sorry. Yeah. So they are the ones who maintain that relationship, ensuring you're comfortable. As we know, one thing, things in life that are certain, death and taxes. Yes. So here we are, you have to pay the taxes. So ensuring that you're even comfortable, even as you're delivering on your civic duty. So that's one. Two, also having a more targeted approach, as I said earlier. It was one person, or rather, I was a person dealing with both the large, medium taxpayers and the small. So can we have a special, it's almost like specializing in a particular way and dealing with a certain category who have their unique challenges, unique tax concerns. So I think it's more of a better focus. And also, when it comes to taxpayer education, having when you're sending out communication, when you're engaging them on taxpayer education matters, bringing them up to speed on tax policy changes, all that, having a very targeted approach to the specific clientele.
Okay. Yeah. How do you ensure that, because this is one of the things, isn't it, that if you have more people in the basket, then it becomes easier cross board.
Correct.
That has always been the argument, that you're able to widen the tax base and then so you lower the responsibility or the burden on shoulders. How can you ensure that before you even start to have this support or give this education, that you have more people in the basket? How have you been able to do that, or how are you venturing into doing that?
So, as remember when I was painting the picture, I started by 20 million plus, but not everyone is paying. Some are there. Yes, you have a PIN, but you're not paying. You're not filing. And our clarion call has been, if you have more people in the basket, just to use your words, then it means the burden, ideally, should reduce on those who are already paying.
Yes.
Because if you see, historically, we have come from a point where we focused more on brick and mortar. Yeah? And of course, when come COVID only just fast-tracked what we knew should have been done, in the sense that people are carrying out, conducting business, people having transactions, but not necessarily in a building.
Yeah.
So we've come from that point. Now we are moving into technology space. Yeah. Technology for us is key. And in doing that, then all this tax base, as you're talking about tax base expansion, how do you bring more people? Because there are very many people transacting. There's a lot of money crisscrossing on various channels, but we have no visibility. So introducing technology then brings visibility. So for those who are already paying, it only makes their work easier. So it facilitates them. It makes tax compliance easier and less cumbersome. Now, for those who are not, it means then we have visibility on more people who then should be where we need them to be for the benefit of these others. And when I talk about doing tax-based expansion, it's not necessarily only for the small. Think about the digital economy. Even for the LMT, you'd have that. They would be in that space, digital economy, cross-border transactions. So with all this, then it brings more people into the basket. And then it means if the target is 2 trillion or whatever, it means there are more people contributing towards that trillion. And thus we don't have the pressure or the urgency or the push to increase the taxes.
Would you see a definite, for example, the 3 organizations right here, CT and Sons, Ndu and Labelle and Dennis and the dudes, whatever. And everybody has... we could actually make that something, but okay. We essentially are saying that we're going for this. And now, obviously, you, Rispa, as KRA, saying this is what we're going for. Now, if it was just CT in that basket, that's why we're going to come for CT hard and fast and say, you got to give this, you got to give this. But if you introduce these other 2 people into the basket, then the burden on CT actually reduces.
Correct.
Now, is there a direct mode of communication that is trying to get Kenyans who are running businesses to understand this? Because kind of like what we joked about in the very beginning, where people are hiding under the tables, that could be the thing that somebody's thinking, well, somebody's wanting to come for all my money, so rather than for me bear this heavy responsibility of how many ever percent, I will avoid it. That's the reality.
Correct.
So what's the communication to get people to understand, hey folks, the more people that we have here, the less the burden on your shoulders?
As Respond as KRA, speaking for KRA, I can say we have done quite a bit in terms of taxpayer education, building awareness.
Yeah.
We have done it by sector. We have done it by tax category. We have done it on the digital platforms. We have done it physically in person. But truth be told is that we always get feedback. We don't hear you.
Okay.
And when we get that feedback, so we have to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, okay, these ones who are not hearing us, where are they? So that we can then go into that space.
Or what is it that you're saying that amounts to not being heard?
Aha, good question. In some instances, we've been told, you guys come here na munaongea kizungu mingi. Okay? So what you're saying, whereas it's important, but we don't understand you. So what have we done? We have plus or minus about 10,000 staff. Those are many dialects in there. So what do? We go into the different communities. Basically what we're trying to do, speak Kalenjin, speak Kikuyu, speak Luya, speak Kamba, speak Taita, speak Luo. All of us, how can we get to you, the Kenyan, or non-resident, because it's not just Kenyan.
True.
As long as you're transacting in our jurisdiction, and the law expects you to pay, what kind of communication? And every day we learn. That is why it's always important for us to get feedback. Sometimes it's harsh, because the type of job that we do is also not easy. But what we do, we look for the positive message in that. Even where taxpayers or Kenyans or non-residents are complaining about one thing or the other, what we do is to try and find what is the message. What can we do differently? So that is how we try to get. So different platforms. I am here. This is the same way of saying it is important to pay our taxes. It's our civic duty.
Absolutely.
We need the roads. We need lighting. We need children to be in school. We need mothers to deliver safely. We need all these things. And it starts with us.
Okay. What are these businesses, and because we're talking about the large and how you've divided these numbers for us to say who fits where. What are they telling you that they need in terms of support? Because usually we find that when somebody talks about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you find that is representative of a lot of the rest of the population of businesses. What are they telling you that they need the most support with that we're not that needs to be addressed?
I think I can box them. I can actually categorize them into two largely: facilitation and quick turnaround time on their concerns. So many things can fall under that. And when I talk about facilitation, I'm not able to file my return. I have a system problem. How fast can I resolve that? I have these numbers on my ledger. There is this reconciliation element. This doesn't make sense. I don't agree with these taxes. Something is not right. My ledger was not credited. You see, all this is facilitation and quick response time. And that is why we have actually assigned the account managers and relationship managers, so that when you have an issue, you know who to call. And when you get to that person is not necessarily the one with the answer. They might not be the ICT expert, but they know who they need to assign to you to help you. So as I said, this is a process that has started on 1st of March. And we are now refining it. Remember, it was all under me, and probably looking back, maybe in some instances it was touch and go. But now there's that opportunity to delve deeper and say, okay, what are the specific concerns? When we introduce technology, I mean, with every technology, it can have hiccups. So you think that, wow, I found a solution. Now they can file online. Now they can...
When you talk about things like e-teams.
Precisely. And that's exactly where I'm going. So you think, now I have a solution. So these ones are covered. Now let me focus on the smaller ones. But then they tell you, we have these systems that cannot easily integrate with your system. Okay? Or we remitted something. We've transmitted invoices, but we cannot see them on our ledger. You see, all this boils down to facilitation and how fast you can resolve their issues. Now, when you talk about disputes, in every transaction, in any business transaction, there's likely to be a dispute, not just necessarily tax. Now, because of that, even with the tax disputes, the key for them is how fast can we resolve? Because we don't want to spend so much time fighting. How fast can we resolve these challenges and problems so that we get back to doing our business and you get back to doing what you do? So it's purely, I would actually say, facilitation and quick turnaround time and listening to them because of their unique needs, their tax a compliance, and their keenness to be compliant, because of those unique needs, sometimes policies could be introduced that don't quite augur well with their businesses. So again, also listening to them and seeing how best can we support them.
I have to ask 2 questions. One, what role does KRA play in determining or contributing to the policies that then end up as actionable processes and practices that KRA has, like determining who to tax what and when to increase taxes and how? That's my first question. When you answer it, then I'll ask the second one.
Okay, thank you for your question. So what role do we play?
Yes.
First, I think we have the sole responsibility of collection of taxes, and we've done it over many years. Meaning, give it to us, we can say a thing or 2 and 3 and 4 about taxes.
Yes.
And when you introduce a certain tax, what its implication is.
Yes.
So, and now this one, not just generally, even when you go sector specific.
Yes.
So it means in the same way that proposals can be put out there and they go through the motions all the way to Parliament and they are approved by His Excellency, we can actually contribute and saying either whether this is good or this, yes, whereas it will bring more revenue, but it will impact negatively on this other side. So that same way, if you noticed in the last 2 or 3 engagements on finance bill, is that Kenyans also are invited, different sector, different categories of people, to come and also comment on what these taxes mean. So you'll be surprised to know that in the same manner, just that, yes, we are aware, and of course, because out of practice over time, we know what the implications are likely to be. Now, most of the Kenyans, when you're called upon to comment about the introduction of a certain tax, more often than not, you'll find some people will focus on what does it mean for our sector. Now, for us, we'll have a look at the overall view. If we take this, what does this mean? If we do this, what does this mean? I don't know whether I've answered your question, but generally, that is our role.
You actually have, because I was looking at a time which was a downtime turn for our country and our economy in the COVID era.
Yes.
And certain steps were taken by that government.
Correct.
The citizenry were given a lot of leeway and release on the taxes.
Yeah.
And the targets that had been set were actually being met.
Twice.
Surpassed even.
True.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Correct.
Meaning, the lived experience with the reality that was imposed on us by COVID was that there are certain things which, if you do, the outcomes are easily predictable. And one doesn't see that happening now. But let me leave that for the time being. I'm going to park it because it tends to get political. But it does. We leave that for the politicians. The second question is, when you talk about communication, I am glad that you have said KRA is represented by the diversity of Kenya. It actually is. But this is a question that I have to ask. How strong is your communication team? Because the things that you say, when they are not understood, there are people who actually specialize in ensuring it is understood. You've said, this is what you want to say. But if you say it this way, it will not be understood. This is how you say it. I asked that question because if the communication was effective, people would happily pay their taxes. Despite the problems that we have. The problems we have now are not greater than the problems we had during COVID. COVID marked the peak of the problems people can actually go through because it's uncharted waters and everything around it. Now, I'm not accusing your communication team. No, I'm not. I am actually saying that even we in the media get it wrong. There are times we communicate things which are not really accurate. And if you say it was our interpretation of it, and we've even issued apologies when we've said things that we shouldn't have said the way we do. So a media house makes mistakes. Now, a unit of government as critical as KRA has to get these things right.
Correct.
Because if you look at our population, if you look at the economy, despite our problems, the economy is still vibrant. It has been more vibrant in the past. It still works. Correct. Now, if it works, it therefore means we should be able to collect more money.
Your thoughts?
I wish to start by saying we sell a difficult product.
You do.
Okay? We sell a very difficult product. And, maybe the product you sell is news, is what I want to know what's happening in the country. I want to know what is beyond. So it's exciting and all. So we sell a difficult product. But I'll tell you one thing. There's one example I like to use. Think of a pyramid. In fact, call it a rectangle. Don't even complicate a pyramid. I say pyramid, but think about a rectangle. And then split that into 3. Top, which will be a small, if you divide it, put 2 lines in between. So there'll be a small top. Then there is a middle, which is wider. And there's the bottom, which is even wider, the widest. The way I look at our taxpayers generally, the way I look at us, and you see, remember when I say taxpayers, I'm also one of them. When I look at us as Kenyans, that bottom bit of the pyramid is the widest. And I say most taxpayers actually fall there. They want to comply, they want to pay. Now, there's this second bit, which is a little bit narrow. They want to comply, they want to pay. But maybe without a little nudge, they will fall off. So we have to come in and say, oh, by the way, it's 20th pay. Oh, by the way, it's 20th has passed. You have not paid. By the way, 9th, please remember.
You need to pay.
Please remember there is this upcoming. Oh, I don't want problems. I want to comply. I will pay. Then there is that small bracket, that small gap at the top. It is the smallest. But the reality of it, that is the team of can't pay, won't pay, catch me if you can.
If you can. And I'll hide under the... So let's look at some of those things. I want to take a break, Rispa. Sorry for that. Just interject at that point. Let's take a break, but come back because maybe those are definitely some of the things that then you deal with, the catch me if you can kind of thing. So let's come back. Let's also talk about amnesties when we come back, because that's also something that comes into play here. But we'll continue with this when we come back from this break. Rispa Simiyu is the Commissioner for Large and Medium Taxpayers, and we're looking at, all right, so how do we support in terms of making sure that we keep tax obligations at 25 minutes to 9 o'clock? It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be back with this right after the short break.
Asante kwa watu ya Daga. Lakini vile niliona hii mjeso, nikaanza kujesa na nimeshinda kwa shilingi 30, nimeshinda shilingi 1,150,000. Watu wa Daga, asante sana. Mbarikiwe sana. Kwa ajili ni ya ukweli, naambia wenye wajacheza wacheze. Hizi pesa niko na shughuli ya school fees, tena na kuongeza kilimo yangu. Nasema dunia sana.
Nenda kwenye paybill 440 account KTN amount shilingi 20 hadi shilingi 2,000 and get your cash with direct to your M-Pesa. Cheza Daka.
Unasonga huko kirumali mbali unakoa then mpaka when you are not Nyeri mpati. Sawa sawa.
Okay mtosi.
Usikuwa umeniitiza wazimu sana. Nimekuja tu kwa sababu umeniambia kuna nini?
Sasa nikwambie mama.
Hatuna kitu mama.
Mwambao. Ile kitu utaenda kunjionea leo. Sikundangani. Ni ajabu.
Makaa inaendaje kwa nyama? Na mimi ndio nauliza. Isi senyu sinaingiaje kwa makaa? Wale ningegona hivi kimekakati. Mikakati ninjeke kona. Ndio ngone kwa. Tuta sweta ile tuli. Unajua kitu moja unaitwa mikakati. Leta mtu wa manage nyumba yako.
Mimi msichana nitafuta hapa. Nilete panga inikate. Inikate mikuu.
Excuse me sister, stop. Ani majirani wako.
Kabisa.
My good neighbor.
Na wewe? Ulikucha lini?
Lazima twende.
Tupige hiyo kitu yenye mna. Come on.
Come off the break when you were talking about, okay, so there are those who will they'll do it, because they know they can. There are those of us who will say, okay, maybe I need a reminder, please, nudge me and I'll do it. And then even if I'm late, if you remind me, I'll say, oh my God, okay, I need to do this and get it done. But then you said that there are those who will say, yeah, right. Was going to use my till, but now here you're coming, I'm going to ask people to pay in cash or whatever the case may be, because we've seen that. How then do you deal with that? And this comes in some of the challenges that then you have to face in terms of keeping people up to their obligations, and saying, so what are the challenges that you face apart from stuff like that, and how do you deal with them?
Okay, so I want to address it. I want to approach it in two different ways. One, for the large and medium taxpayers, I would actually say those are more established businesses. Like I said, even when you look at their turnover, established, you can even, today you'll come and find them the same place, tomorrow you'll come back and find the same place. When you come to medium, when you talk about public sector is public sector. There are offices everywhere. You can get these people. Now, when you talk about any other team that says, catch me if you can, and I want to link it to your comment on communications team. As I said earlier, we sell a very difficult product. But in our communications team, and to be fair actually to them, even in supporting us to sell that very difficult product, this is a team that comes up with these different ideas of what can we do differently to get to the taxpayer, to make them understand why they need to pay taxes and what their taxes do. Okay? At one point, we attempted to run a campaign of, when you see a good road, a beautiful road, beautiful street lighting, say, done by your taxes. And you've seen other countries have done it. Rwanda have done it, and they did it successfully. Now, so we have a team of young, vibrant people who come up with these ideas of, okay, how do you get to, we talk about Mama Mboga, who also probably has a turnover tax. How do you get to them? They will not understand. They might not understand your English. Yeah, they might not understand, even in some cases, they might not understand your Kiswahili. So there's, how can we have these conversations at a community level? So that is that. So even in addressing this small team, as I said, of catch me if you can, those are the different ways of first communicate. Now, the youngsters, sometimes you put it on TV, you won't find them. You'll find them in social media. Yeah, something will come up. Some of them will do TikToks. We've gone to the schools, having tax clubs, in universities, in high schools, introducing this conversation at an earlier stage in life for our children. So this is what we are doing to hopefully, there are those ones who are already advanced. Catch me if you can, we've perfected it. So now those ones, we engage other measures, and those are enforcement measures. Yeah, because now at that point, you've educated, you've explained, you've spoken, you've enticed, you've done everything humanly possible within the law. It has not worked. So now you have to bring in other machinery.
Okay.
Yeah? And remember, like I said, it's a small lot. So the bigger bit, and I will tell you, much as sometimes what unfortunately, we say bad news moves faster, spreads faster. Yes. But I will tell you, the larger population, largely happy to pay, happy to comply, two, with a little nudge. I am not fighting, I will pay.
This pyramid that you have given as an illustration, it's a good pyramid, and it's a good illustration of these three sectors. Which of these sectors represents the bulk of the revenue that you collect?
Which of the sectors?
Yes.
The bulk? Yes. The first two?
The first two.
Yes, the first two. I can tell you without
and of the first two, which one has the potential of giving KRA the most money?
I would say maybe the middle and also the top one, if you bring it
both
into
of
the
them.
bracket. Yes.
Okay. So if, as we say, that is the case that we have.
Correct.
And everything that is humanly possible has been tried. Are there things that may not be humanly possible but can be tried? Let me explain myself.
Yeah.
You see, every tool that could be used as an incentive, KRA understands. That you understand everything that needs to be done. It isn't a problem unique to our country. There are countries that are considered rich countries who have a similar problem.
Correct.
In fact, in some cases, it's even worse.
Correct.
Okay? If something isn't working, the person who's making this thing not work, don't you think they're the ones who would have the solution? They know exactly what they do to ensure that it doesn't work. Would they not have the solution? Because after all, they seem to, if they are evading the taxes as much as they can, they have found ways of doing so. Is it possible?
Is it possible that they have a solution, the ones evading?
Yes.
By the time you're actually evading and you've perfected the art,
it
means you know how to get in there and how to get out.
Yes.
That's what it means.
Yes.
And for us, what we can do from our side is to try and create better visibility. And that's where technology comes in. Because we do not have enough hands to follow everybody everywhere.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Okay.
You know, I asked the question.
Yes.
There's something that we saw.
Correct.
The reference point is always the Kibaki government, because we saw very many new things.
Yeah.
When he brought in new, again, technology to determine whether people get receipted for the businesses they have conducted and so forth. And the tax collection, I think the gentleman who was then in charge was called Waweru. They did amazing things. Literally amazing. So, as someone who lives in this country, for the first time my eyes opened and said, we actually do have the money to run our own business.
Right.
And yet from that time, this economy has grown.
Do you know what happened there? Visibility.
Okay.
Yes.
Think about iTax.
Yes.
What happened with iTax? Back in the days, even when it came to filing and paying, you had to ensure, whether it is you or your clerk or whoever, runs and crosses those doors before 5 p.m. Gets into the banking hall of Times Tower before 5 p.m. Now, from the comfort of your bed, even if 9th, which is the POI due date, falls on a Sunday, you're not worried. Because all you need to do is get online and pay your taxes.
And you're ready to go.
You file your return wherever you are. As long as the date is right, it doesn't matter where it falls.
Okay.
And when you look at our laws, even back then, they would always, it would always be anything of, if 9th falls on a Sunday, then it means your due date is 7th, which is a Friday. But now that problem has been addressed.
Okay.
And that is why now we are going into the e-Teams conversation, e-filing, file online, pay online, web-based return, even as we say, Mulika Mwizi, we call it feature phone.
Yes.
Star 222, you can make your
You can
payment.
do something.
So basically what we're trying to say, we have brought the solutions to your door.
So now those are some of the technological solutions that we talk about. The other tools that you've also brought in terms of support, and it seems like a phenomena, but it's been talked about for some time, and that's in the area of tax amnesty, right? So when we talk about this for small, medium, and large businesses in terms of tax obligations and compliance, how has amnesty come in to help, and what is it really, and how can folks tap into it?
Now, I love talking about amnesty. Why? Because when it comes to taxes, we are known for taking and taking and taking and taking some more. Amnesty, we are giving and giving more. What do I mean by that? Amnesty is basically a waiver, an opportunity for us to waive your penalties, interest, and fines that arose on principal taxes that remained unpaid by prior to 31st December 2023.
Okay.
Now, this is the second time amnesty is running. First time it ran, and the cutoff was 31st December 2022. And it ran for 9 months because, of course, of the delay of introduction of the Finance Bill and Act. So that one ran up to 31st December 2022. So what does that... And now it is 31st December 2023.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Any tax liability, principal tax liability that arose prior to 31st December 2023, if you make that payment by 30th of June 2025, in other words, 3 months, 2.5 months from now, if you settle that principal tax, it means any penalty, interest, or fine related to that principal that you had not paid will be waived.
Okay.
Now, before this program, there was a provision in the law that provided for waiver of penalties and interest. But that provision came with something. Basically, you had to write explain why, justify, put in place the mitigation. You know, like, this is the reason why I was out of the country, my business did what, my business was up in flames, all those reasons. But with the amnesty, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
As long as it's 31st December 2023, you pay by 30th of June 2025, you are good to go. And in that payment, it doesn't have to be a bullet payment.
Okay.
You can get into a payment plan. As long as the payment for the principal is done by 30th of June 2025.
So as we talk about amnesty, one would want to ask, this amnesty, is it open for all, or is it for a specific group of individuals? As you respond to that, there's a question that has been asked by one of our listeners here, and Angela Gab is asking, I registered a company but couldn't continue with it to avoid conflict of interest with my job. For the past 3 years, I've been trying to deregister my obligation in vain, filing zero tax monthly taxes.
So one, I would say the good thing she is doing is actually filing the returns. Because that means then she has mitigated the problem. Because then as long as you have that tax, you have the PIN, and you have that tax obligation, there is that expectation that you'll file and pay. So I think that's step one, and it's a plus. So two things, two ways of approaching that. One, anything beyond 31st December, as long as there's no principal tax, if there is any way penalties that has arisen, that will automatically be wiped out. As long as there's no principal, it will be automatic. Now for this other one, now she has to communicate with the tax service office. So the way KRA is structured is that depending on where you are, as in generally speaking, depending on where you are, your PIN is in an office near you. But in some instances, you'll find that perhaps you worked in, let me take an example of, you worked in Narok. And you went to the Narok office and had your PIN, you were given a PIN from there. So that we call that your PIN base. But then subsequently you move to Nairobi.
Okay.
And we have an office down the road, Samia Business Park. So what you need to do is to write and explain that, because we know it's not unique to her. We know there are cases at the time it was a campaign of driving, of saying people, when you get out of school or when you want to do this, you need to have a PIN. But then probably a ball was dropped somewhere of reminding you that when you have a PIN, there are certain expectations, obligations that come with it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then, once you do that, I guess some other questions then come into play here, because then if I have, I've taken advantage of the tax amnesty, for example, and then I'm getting into a place whereby, okay, before a certain time, then I'm kind of that moratorium where I'm able to get my things in order. When folks come to you, having realized or having been forced to realize that they've made a mistake, or rather have not paid, and get onto a payment plan, even though you're paying in arrears, there are still those obligations that are futurely coming in. How do you then create it in such a way that this person then doesn't get overburdened on top of the burden? And that's one question that comes through. I'm paying on what I haven't done in the past, and I still have future payments to make. How then are you able to make it for me so that I'm still able to meet my obligations as a business?
Okay. So the one thing that we always encourage taxpayers, remain current. What do I mean by remain current? Even as you're settling past dues, ensure then that you don't create a problem. Because remember, some of these taxes, when you're talking about agency taxes, VAT, excise, this is actually not your money. PAYE for employers, it is not the employer's money.
Okay.
It is my money. When KRA pays me, KRA is expected to remit that PAYE on my account, because it's not KRA's money. So when you're talking about agency taxes, this is money you've collected on behalf of the government, but you've collected on someone else's behalf, the consumer of the product.
Okay.
So that's a starting point. So agency taxes, remit. Now, in some instances, someone would say, I have corporation tax. That is your tax as an entity. And when you're talking about corporation tax, then it will fold you, whether in installment taxes, balance of tax, etc. You're expected to pay that on the go. What that means, because you see the tax laws are there.
Yeah.
Tax laws have prescribed even the due dates and what the consequences are if you don't comply with the due dates. So that one is clear. And you see, there are those things we can't negotiate. The due date is there. It is known. You're expected to pay. Now, for the back taxes, with or without the amnesty, we have engaging taxpayers in that conversation of the payment plan, with or without the amnesty.
Okay.
So without the amnesty, what we'll advise you is, going forward, from today, please, you've come clean. From today, keep a clean record.
Okay.
Keep a clean ledger. Back taxes, we have the payment plan. But we want you to take advantage of the amnesty. And that's why we are pushing that you do it for back taxes that fell pre-2023. You do it by 2025 June.
The message is actually very clear.
Yeah.
What if that entity is not able to?
Now, what if, when they're not able to, sadly so, you forfeit the benefit of the amnesty because it will lapse on the 30th of June 2025. That's just the
And when it lapses, what happens?
That's it. Now we come for the penalties and interest because that provision for waiver no longer
So essentially,
exists.
the penalties and interest
Become
will now
tax.
Will now invite more penalties and interest.
Not necessarily. You see, a penalty tends to be a one-off. So, yeah, it's an interest that continues to accumulate.
Yes.
Just like a bank loan.
Yes.
Or a loan.
Yes.
Yeah. The penalty is one-off. But the interest continues
to accumulate. How do you handle tax? The word that I want to, it just flew out of my head. When there's obviously a dispute. There we go.
I thought that's what you wanted to say, but you want to say it.
So how do you handle the disputes when somebody says, actually, you know what? No, these are the numbers that I have, and we know that there's an entire tribunal under the judiciary, right? So how do you handle those issues when Ndu and Bell, that was the company, wasn't it?
Yes.
Ndu and Bells comes and says, no, actually, these are the numbers I have on my... and in some places, maybe there was even double taxation or something like that. And KRA, of course, with the numbers, are saying, well, no, this is what it looks like. And then we say, okay, well, you know what? Since we can't figure this out, we're going to go to the tribunal. How do you handle those disputes?
Good. So with every business transaction, remember my statement? There's likely to be a dispute, whether tax or otherwise. Now, there's a very clearly laid out procedural process in the Tax Procedures Act on what to do when there's a dispute. And the dispute is just basically, we've agreed to disagree. And we're not enemies, we just agreed to disagree. So an assessment is raised or a demand is made, you write back and you say, no, I disagree. Now, this moves even from my space, be it LMT or basically even previously the domestic taxes, it moves under now the legal arm, because under the legal department, then you'd have the litigation element, there is the independent review of objections, and then there is the ADR. And I'll come to the alternative dispute resolution. So when a taxpayer writes back and says, no, I disagree, and it is okay, by the way, it is the right of the taxpayer to disagree where they feel they need to disagree. But you don't just write a line and say, I disagree. Of course, you have to give reasons why.
Yes.
Now, that goes into a different period, and there's a whole 60 days that run for the commissioner to respond and say, actually, you're right. I have removed that demand, done away with the demand. Or two, you're partially right. So I'm partially amending this and saying, okay, here I remove this, but here I will still demand. Or saying, I totally disagree with you for the following reasons, and I'm still making a demand. Now, that process is still within KRA.
Okay.
Yeah? Now, once that happens, then, if the taxpayer still feels aggrieved, that's when they have a right of appeal to the Tax Appeals Tribunal.
Okay.
Now, Tax Appeals Tribunal is not a KRA function.
No, it's not. Yeah.
It's actually now officially under the judiciary.
Yes.
Now, when you go to the Tax Appeals Tribunal, you actually have even to give notice of intention to appeal. So you notify us of intention to appeal, and then you place your documents before the Tax Appeals Tribunal. Tax Appeals Tribunal, like any other judicial process, will give you a date, etc., and the process follows. Depending on the determination of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, if you're still feeling aggrieved, the next stage is the High Court. From there, Court of Appeal. From there, depending on the matter, even to the Supreme Court, because we've had a couple of cases go all the way. Now, whereas that is a laid down procedure, what has KRA done? Again, to facilitate our taxpayers and try to support in every way possible, we have an alternative dispute resolution framework. Alternative dispute resolution takes different forms. Yeah? So you'd have mediation, you'd have arbitration, and even the Constitution recognizes the traditional forms of dispute resolution, where the wazes or mamas will sit under a tree and have that conversation and determine a problem. Close an issue. Now, the ADR you can actually have it either go all the way to the tribunal and seek leave of the tribunal to engage in that alternative dispute resolution for a process. What does that mean? Because once your matter is, when an assessment is raised, we always say time begins to run, because the law prescribes within this day you must have done this, within this timeline you must have done. Once the matter has been sort of quote unquote parked at the tribunal, you come back. Where we are saying you did not produce documentation or evidence of 1, 2, 3, you produce that. You'll be surprised at how many cases we've actually engaged at the alternative dispute resolution. And once that is resolved, we have an ADR agreement. That agreement becomes a consent.
Okay.
And that consent is what is filed at the tribunal to mark the matter closed.
Okay.
So that is the process of dispute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, as you've seen, over the, there was the really robust support that has started to come from, KRA helping people, walking hand by hand in hand. Have you seen that there has been larger, greater compliance over time? And then what do you think now moving forward, futurely, that we would actually be able to employ and engage to ensure that some of the things that we mentioned in the beginning can actually happen, widening the tax base, getting more people to come into the basket?
I can say yes. Compliance levels have really increased, greatly increased. And I think also, like I said earlier, I think technology has played a very big role. Because if you think about it, when you want to file a return, I know that I don't have to drive, I don't have to take a boda board, I don't have to do that. So I've cut that out. So it's very easy to comply. And I think when you make compliance easier and cheaper, then it means it encourages more people to comply. So that, yes, I agree. Compliance levels have gone up.
Okay.
What do we need to do next? Like, say, for example, if you look at the LMT side, and if it cuts across actually even this general domestic taxes and even on the customs side, is engaging in what we call the round tables with business member organizations. Sometimes it's sector-based, and we're talking about private sector. Sometimes it's sector-based. Sometimes it's not specifically. It could be CAM, Kenya Station Manufacturers. It could be KEPSA. It could be ISPAC. It could be LSK. All those, right? So there's that engagement on the private sector front. On the public sector with other government agencies, talk about integration. And one that we are very proud of. Now, this one, allow me just to go to the public sector
really quickly,
division very quickly, is that with that integration, right now, if it's a county making a payment for PAYE, pay as you want, they do a lump sum to CBK. And then we have at the back end to come and do the reconciliation. But once this integration is done, and that is iTax, IFMIS, HIRS, and CBK, the IB, banking, internet banking, with that, then it means automatically all these payments will be credited to your ledger.
Okay.
So I think that, and of course, education.
Sure.
And awareness. I cannot belabor that.
It's been a breath of fresh air for sure, getting a lot of these insights with you this morning. Rispa Simiyu is the Commissioner with Large and Medium Taxpayers, and we look forward to further conversations about this, keeping us all compliant and obligated. Thank you so much for being in the Situation Room this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m.